Hey y'all, everybody's favorite bumpkin here. Welcome to the first episode of Tool Time at the Temple. I planned on doing these.
Does it include batteries?
It might include batteries.
I prefer USB-C cords, thank you.
You realize Mama watches these, right?
Love you, Mama.
Can't take her anywhere. This is we're going to take a stab at something a little bit different here. And this is something I've had on my mind for a while here, but I didn't exactly know the best way to present it, show it, kind of give y'all an info dump. So here we are. We're jumping in the deep end of the pool, so bear with me. A lot of you guys have asked about certain tools that I use, like specialty tools, things like that, and also what tools or equipment that you might need for doing your own service stuff, you know, here at the house from a DIY standpoint. Now, y'all know me. I'm a cheap ass, okay? So
I like DIY.
Honey, you ain't helping me here.
Sorry.
She's big on DIY. Anyways, a lot of you guys have been asking me about what you need to get for doing your own work at the house and everything, and I've tried to figure out a way to present that to you all from a bottom of the barrel type of budget without compromising on what you're going to be able to do to get the job done successfully. Let's take a stab at this and see what shakes loose, okay? Since we've been doing a lot of carburetor stuff here lately with Petty Officer Squidboy's bike and, you know, the Fester Express Ironhead and, you know, some other stuff, damn it, now I got to reset my brain. Now, a lot of you guys may remember the ZL900 Eliminator that was our first candidate slash victim for the Ramwin Park series when me and Shade Tree Surgeon were still shooting videos over on his channel. There was quite a bit of info there on the carbs on that bike that I really wanted to share with you guys. Honestly, I was at a point right then where from a technical standpoint, I wasn't able to do it very well to where it would have came out looking like anything worth a crap. The audio wasn't very good. The video damn sure wasn't very good because I had a GoPro strapped to my head with duct tape and stuff. By the way, that if you got a rug like mine, that stings when you pull it off. I know a lot of you guys have multi-cylinder Japanese bikes, V4s, inline 4s, twins. You know, you got V-Stars and Shadows and Intruders and blah, 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 blah. And then you got some of those weird people out there that ride those Triumph things. But anyway, what I did is I did a little bit of digging around because, number one, it's kind of a bummer having to drag tools from work to the house and work to the house, back and forth, especially when you live on a bike, you know, day in and day out like I do. I was looking for an affordable set of gauges for doing carb work, you know, as far as synchronizing them, setting idle mix, things like that I could have to keep here at the house that was not going to beat the crap out of the budget, but on the same page was going to have certain features that I was looking for to where it wasn't going to compromise on my ability to get the job done correctly. Those showed up today, kind of unexpectedly, actually. They actually got here a little bit early. So we're going to dive into this and let me walk you through these and show you some of the pros and cons of this particular set. And also, I will have links to all of these products that I'm showing in this video down in the description down there. You guys can check them out, put them on your watch list, put it in your wish list, yada, yada, whatever. You know, write a sticky note to your significant other and put it on the fridge, whatever. Let's take a look at these things. We'll open them up. I'll show you what they come with, what features they have, and also on this particular set of gauges, these do have calibration adjustments on there, and we're going to jump into that as well. Okay, so sit tight. Okay, guys, what we've got here, these are from Vever, however you pronounce it, but you guys probably see these on Amazon all the time. I got this particular set off of eBay, but I will drop the links for both the eBay item listing and also the Amazon listing for these. And just to give you a little tip, if you do like I did and you put these in your cart and you sit on it for a day or two, they'll automatically jump up and they'll send you a lower price offer, whether it be 10, 15%, something like that. I got lucky on these, and they sent me a 25% offer right off the rip. And I'm like, okay, sold. Cheap-ass fat guy approved. So let's open these things up and see what comes in them. Now, full disclosure, I already opened this up just to make sure everything arrived in one piece and nothing was busted. All the pack and floof and foam, that's the only piece of foam that was left. And honestly, they had this crap folded up in half into some half-ass foam taco and jammed underneath the gauges. But anyway, that doesn't matter. So that's out of here. Basically, what these are just a kind of a generic low buck universal type of vacuum gauge. If you look closely on the face of these gauges, it's got your little red zones and green zones for, normal motor, late ignition timing, late valve timing, blah, blah, blah. All that stuff is a holdover from, the 70s era, basically, when everybody still had breaker points in their cars and an old 2G Rochester carburetor underneath the hood. So that part of it, we're going to completely ignore because it's not relevant for us here in the motorcycle world. What is relevant, though, is if you look on these gauges, if you look at the way the scales are graduated here, these are graduated in millimeters of mercury. And over here, you've got inches of mercury. I always pay attention to this scale here. And I'm not necessarily looking for a specific number. I don't have a target for that. But what I am looking for is consistency from this one to his neighbor, to his neighbor, to his neighbor. That is a true reflection of how balanced your carburetors are. If you'll remember, I said that these gauges are able to be calibrated. And that's very important for right out of the box because if you look, our number one cylinder gauge here, which is going to be on the far left, and just for reference, all metric motorcycles, at least to the best of my knowledge, inline fours, parallel twins, they always reference the left-hand cylinder as you're sitting in the driver's seat. That is being number one cylinder, and then number two, number three, number four. If you look closely here, you notice our reading on our needle is a little bit different on number one versus number two. Number three is just a smidge different. And then number four is kind of creeping out there too. So I'm going to show you how you get all these in perfect harmony, if you will. But before I do that, let me go over some of this other stuff that this kit comes with. Now, obviously, you got to have hoses to hook your gauges up to the motorcycle. The hose that they give you with this, it's usable, but it's not that great of a quality. And to be honest with you, I'm probably going to replace this hose here before too long because I expect this stuff is probably going to get hard and stiff, and it's probably going to start splitting wherever I stretch these hoses over, like a manifold nipple on an intake manifold or a carburetor body, something like that. Now, these hoses that they give you, they're approximately, let's call it 2.5 feet long. That's also a little bit on the short side for what I prefer too, because certain times it just ain't quite enough because of the way you've got to wrap around the bike and get to everything to make your connections. One thing this kit does come with that I was really happy to see though is all the different adapters here. They've got long reach adapters that are a M5 thread, and they've got a mid-length adapter that is an M5 thread. And where that's important is on a lot of your older Honda models like CB750s, CB900, also especially the old four-cylinder Goldwings, GL1000, GL1100, GL1200. There are certain times where you've got to have an extension to be able to get to the vacuum port on the intake manifold, but on the GL1000, 1100, and 1200, you've got to use a short one on the rear two ports, and you've got to use a long one on the front two to be able to have enough room to get out and around the crash bars and the frame protectors on the bike. So that's a nice little touch. All of these have a flange with a sealing O-ring where you just screw them in until they just bottom out, and you just barely give them a little tweak to snug them in, and they seal up. That way you don't have to worry about it sucking air around the threads here or anything like that and throwing your readings off. Now keep in mind, these are machined out of brass, so you do need to be careful with them. They're going to be a little bit on the delicate side, but we've got long reach and mid reach M5 threaded fittings, and they have two different style of M6. M6 by 1.0 thread, which is very common on predominantly Yamahas, some Honda models, but not that many. But that's about the only time you see that. And then they have these. They're still M6. These are a fine thread M6. This is standard M6 by 1.0 thread pitch, and this other one is M6 by 0.8 thread pitch. Now, the only time that I've ever seen these out in the wild is some really old Suzuki models, like early 70s GS series bikes. That's the only time I've ever run across those. But it's nice that they give them to you, because use this as a get me by, like put a piece of hose here to connect a vacuum petcock or something like that. You've got the ability to do that. And also they have one here that is meant specifically for doing stuff like that. This is a blank. It's still got the taper here for your hose to connect to, but down here it's got a straight shank with no threads on it, to where it just slips onto another hose. And they give you this little baggie of stuff here. They try not to spill these everywhere. They give you clamps to clamp the hoses onto the spigots on the gauges. Honestly, I will probably never use those, especially if I upgrade the hose on these with some silicone hose or some of the Motion Pro gray line hose. They give you a couple extra screws that I'm really not sure why they give you, but just from the looks of them, I would say it's where the gauges mount to the back of the panel that they all mount to. If you look closely, they give you some spare O-rings for the vacuum adapters here. So that way, if you have one that dries out and splits or something like that, you got spares where you can replace them. And I just dropped one on the floor. Great. In addition to the spare O-rings here for all of your vacuum adapters, they give you these impossibly tiny little O-rings here. And what those are spare O-rings for the dampener valves that's mounted on the bottom of these gauges. I'll show you those here in a little bit. Let's set these hoses off to the side, and let's get the gauges themselves out, because that's the meat and taters of it. That's what we want to work with right now. Now, I ain't gonna lie, this case is big, it's chunky, takes up a lot of real estate. I can't really gripe about it, because it does a good job of packaging all the gauges and everything. You know, it'll definitely keep them organized and keep them protected. That way, you know, they're not bouncing around the shop. This thing is about twice the size of the case that my K&L gauges that I've had for, 15 years and counting came in. The gauges themselves...
Oh my God!
What?
The book Rescuers just did a restock today, and they have a book that is titled 90 Minutes in Heaven.
Is this like a DIY book for how to break into the prostitution industry?
I don't know. Are you game?
Y'all see me out there? Mind your business. Bike parts are expensive these days, folks.
Let's look at these gauges here. Now, this is what I was talking about on these gauges. Obviously, down here, this is where your hoses connect. This is a small thumb screw, and what this is this is a dampener valve, and it is adjustable. The whole purpose of this is to smooth out the reading on the gauge, and if you look really close, you can see that ridiculously small little O-ring that they were nice enough to give you a spare for. What these do is, if you didn't have a dampener here, this needle would bounce and twitch like it was having some kind of a seizure, and you would never be able to read it, because they flutter around so much. It's literally like you see my hand doing right now, because vacuum does not occur in a steady, smooth stream. It comes in pulses. The dampener is here to add some restriction for that vacuum passage going from the hose into the body of the gauge before it gets to the gauge itself. And what it does, it smooths those pulses out. So the more you screw this dampener in, the more restriction it puts, and it settles the gauge down to where not only does it react slower, but it stays more steady. Slight pause for the musical accompaniment of my washing machine out here in the temple. Anyways, like I said, this dampener smooths out the flow of vacuum going into the gauge to where instead of the needle bouncing around like mad, it'll stay in a somewhat steady position. Now, the way I set these up is I'll tweak on them just a little bit when I first get the bike up and running. I want to see a little bit of movement in it. I want to see a little bit of that twitch. but not much, you know, just enough to see that you've actively got vacuum going to it. Because if you screw these in too tight, it will actually completely shut off the vacuum that's being applied to the gauge. And say this gauge was over here pulling 30 millimeters of mercury and you screwed that in too far, you could reach over and you could turn the bike off and the needle would stay there because it still has vacuum trapped inside the gauge. So you always want to see a little bit of a float to the needle on it. Yep, those screws they give you in the package, they're spares for where all these gauges mount to the back panel that they all mount to, you know, in case you're a klutz like me and you accidentally lose one. So while we're here, and since this is a low buck eBay acquisition, oh, there's one loose right there. We're going to go around and we're going to snug these things up just to make sure we don't lose them and that we don't need those spares. Okay, microphone's still on. That's a good thing. We got all of our screws tightened up to where the gauges mount to the back of the panel. And I pulled 3 of the lenses off of here to where I could get down to the calibration screws on these gauges to where we can even them all out. Now, the easy way to do this and the careful way to do this is take a flat blade screwdriver and, oops, sorry, didn't mean to shake you guys up. It's not an earthquake, I promise. But take a flat blade screwdriver and right here, where the edge of that gauge bezel is right above the brass, take it, wedge it in there, and just twist it kind of gentle. You do need to be gentle with these. And just pop it up off of there. And this is a little fiddly with me doing it and trying to work around the camera, so please understand. Now these gauge lenses are glass, so if you drop them, guess what's going to happen? Yeah, it's not going to end well. So from this point, we need to even out all 4 of our gauges. That way we have a common reference point that we're starting from. And that's a pretty small little flat blade screw that's in the face of those things where the calibration screw is. And that is where this little set right here shines. This little mini screwdriver set, Pittsburgh, Harbor Freight, you guys know me, cheap ass. But this thing is worth its weight in gold because not only does it have little bitty screwdriver bits, it's got extremely small Torx bits in here. It goes all the way down to T4. It goes all the way down to metric 0.8, I think. Yeah, metric 0.8. That's 0.8 of a millimeter. No matter how you slice it, that's really damn small, okay? But it's got Phillips bits, it's got flatheads, whatever you may need. The cool thing on this set, though, and I almost forgot to point it out, the little flex cable here, I think I've used that a grand total of about half of one time because, honestly, it didn't really do anything for me. But this extension bar here, this thing's awesome because it's got a magnetic, sorry, have to pause for the musical interlude from my washing machine out here in the temple. This thing has a magnet that holds the bit in the end. This extension slides down into the body of the screwdriver handle, and it's got a little collet here. It's similar to what you find on a, say, a Dremel tool. It holds in plenty firm, and honestly, if you crank down on this thing, you're going to tear up whatever it is you're trying to screw with the screwdriver before you shove that back up in there. You can do it, but you got to push on it pretty hard. So what we're doing here is we're going to take our small, tiny flat blade that we've got right here. Make sure it fits the head of your screw. Let me bring the action to you. From all 4 of our gauges, we're off pretty good here. We're pretty much bang on in the middle there. So we're going to use that as our reference gauge. That's our master gauge at this point. That one's off just a little bit, and that one's off pretty good. Now, if you look closely, you can see that flat blade screw that is right there by the edge of the needle there. That's a calibration screw, and what it does is it puts pressure on the bourbon tube that is inside these gauges, and it will reset the 0 point of that needle. When you're making adjustments on these, you need to be very delicate with them because they can be damaged fairly easily. One thing that I like to do whenever I'm calibrating gauges like this is I'll make a small adjustment on the screw and then tap the body of the gauge. If you noticed, when I do that, that needle will dance around a little bit. What that does is whenever you tap on the body of the gauge after you make an adjustment, any tension that may be on that needle from the bourbon tube inside the gauge itself, it allows that tension to kind of relax and self-center. That way you get a true reading on these. The way I like to do these is make small adjustments, you know, quarter of a turn at a time. And this one's being a little stiff, and I don't know why. That's not good. There we go. That one moved. I'm hoping I'm not about to break these before I ever use them. That screw seems like it may potentially be stuck. I don't know if you could see that from my hand, but whenever it finally popped with whatever thread locker they've got on these, it's probably super glue. Very small adjustments make a pretty big impact on where that needle comes to rest. Yeah, see, my screwdriver was touching the needle, and that's why it jumped over like that, because I didn't realize that my screwdriver was holding the needle to keep it from going up further. Okay, we're very close to zero there. Hopefully I can get this broke loose without breaking something. Ooh, that makes me nervous. There we go. Whew. I was about to chicken out and return these because I thought that I was about to break that one. It's a little nerve-wracking because, let's be honest, we all know these aren't the best quality. We're trying to make do with what we got here, though. And you can see I am not turning that screw much at all. And we got to go back the other way just a little bit. It's a bit of a dance. Just be patient. Take your time. Just a smidge back and we'll be good. There. I'm happy with that. So let's get over here to our last one. You need to try not to just touch the needle and crank it over, because that will actually bend the mechanism inside the gauge if you move it too far. I'm still going the wrong way. One of these days I'll figure my life out, I promise. Like I said, it's tedious, but it's worth taking the time to get them zeroed out, get them set up right, because the more accurate you set your gauges up initially, the better results you're going to have when you put them on the bike and you start making adjustments to your carbs. So we got all 4 of our gauges balanced out. We got them all set to 0. See, we got zeros right dead center in the middle of the scale across the board. That's what we're looking for. Now, just as a habit, I will tap on the gauges just to make sure that they all return to the same 0 point before I ever hook them up to the bike, because mechanical wear, age, also temperature and humidity, it will affect the 0 on a bourbon tube style gauge like this, especially on these that are a dry gauge where they don't have any kind of a dampener fluid inside the gauge to slow down the movement of the needle. They're extremely sensitive to that, even on the cheap ones like this. So now, let's take our lenses, and these just pop back into place, and don't even really pop. They got like 3 little bumps in the housing where it just slips over it, and it hangs up just enough to hold the lens in place. Just press them down nice and even, but don't press on the glass or else it's going to break. Don't do that. You don't want to be picking glass chunks out of your thumbs. It ain't no fun. Try not to touch the glass, especially on the inside, before you put these things on, or else you're going to see fingerprints in there, and that'll be like a constant brainworm for you, because you'll never be able to unsee it no matter how much you clean them. Be careful, klutzy. Okay, and there we have it. Okay, so we got all of our gauge faces back on, or not the gauge faces, I'm sorry, the gauge lenses and the bezels. Duh. We got all that back on after we got all of our needles zeroed out, and just kind of banging, tapping and banging around on the gauges. Yep, they're all holding 0. What I like to do, take a piece of cord, like some paracord, old shoelace, whatever. Hell, a piece of coat hanger wire if you're desperate. Hook it in these holes here on that gauge bracket to where you can hang these. You want to hang these vertically. You don't want to lay them over on their backs like this if you can help it, because the bourbon tube that senses the air pressure change from the vacuum applied to these, it's most efficient when it is vertical like this, because it does have moving parts in there. And when you lay them on their backs like that, that induces a little bit of drag. That, and also, when you've got these hanging from, say, a handlebar or mirror or something like that, it's just easier to get on eyeball level with them and read them. So one more thing that we want to look at before we hook these onto a bike and start trying to tune with them, let's take a piece of the hose that they gave us. Doesn't matter which one, because, you know, it's a piece of hose and they're all pretty much the same length. That's got a decent slip fit. It's got just a little bit of stretch where it goes around the nipple. I'm not going to bother with those clamps. But let's take a piece of hose, put it on there, wipe it off, you know, that way it doesn't taste icky, and just suck on it a little bit. Put a little vacuum on it and wash the needle. I got my dampener closed up there. Right there. Notice how that guy's not returning to 0 where we left it? That's because it had a small amount of vacuum trapped inside the bourbon tube from that dampener being completely shut off and blocked. And when I zeroed those gauges, it let it move just a little bit. And that one right there moved just a little bit. So 2 of our 4 gauges weren't zeroed the way we thought they were. Would that have made a huge difference if we tuned the bike with it, you know, being that far out comparing to these 2? It wouldn't have been that big, but the thing is, you've got the opportunity to optimize it now. Go ahead and take it. 5 minutes spent now will make a big impact on how the bike idles. Okay, so that one's moving. Let's check his neighbor. Yep, that's moving. And that one went back where we put him. And the last one here. See? I know it's kind of hard to see, but he is just a hair bit off. Now what that tells us is you're going to have a little bit of slop inside the mechanism on these gauges. So it's a good idea to do the suck test, if you will, like I just did. Keep it clean, y'all. Mama watches these. But it's a good idea to induce some movement into the gauges. If you got a vacuum pump, hook a vacuum pump up to them, or if you just happen to have a bike handy, hook them up to one carburetor one by one, let them work around a little bit, and then go back and check your 0 on them. Do that before you put them on the bike initially. And it's not a bad idea to check your 0 on your gauges periodically just to make sure that things haven't changed from mechanical wear and things like that. Now, I'm not going to bore you guys with seeing me pop the lenses back off of these again and re-zero them. So we're going to set the gauges aside for the time being, and I'm going to touch on a couple of other things. Besides, I'm going to put these through their paces a little bit here in a very shortly upcoming video. Guess what? You guys get to see hen's teeth again. That's right, y'all. The old ZL900. It's going back on the lift because we're going to be doing some long-term updates and just to bring you up to speed with some things that have happened on it and some things that we still need to do on it. All right. Well, that more or less wraps up our little review. Well, no, it's not really a review. It's not really a review. It's more of an introduction into something that may help you guys both from a capability standpoint and also from a budget standpoint. Because you know me, y'all, I'm cheap. I can't talk. Y'all know me. I'm a cheap ass, okay? The way I look at this stuff, it's a couple of different criteria that I keep into consideration whenever I'm shopping for stuff like this. Stuff that I want for either me myself here at the house or stuff that I want to share with you guys. Here's the rundown on that. Number one, price point. Yeah, it's a necessary evil, but we gotta watch out for the almighty dollar here. But what I'm looking for is value per dollar. What's the capabilities of what I'm looking at as a potential purchase? Number two, what's the versatility of what I'm looking at as a potential purchase? Is this something where I'm only going to be able to use it for one job and one specific job that I may only do once a year? If that's the case, I'm probably going to move on to find something else. Even if it does cost a little bit more money, that adds the value to me because instead of it being a niche tool, if you will, it has more versatility to where I can use it more frequently and regain that investment back out of it because it's going to allow me to do more than just one specific job. In the case of these carburetor gauges, what I really liked about them was the fact that they give you multiple different adapters for the vacuum ports that will cover pretty much anything from Honda, Suzuki, Yamaha, Kawasaki, Brit bikes, the BMW stuff. The only drawback to this set of gauges that I'm seeing so far to this point right now, number one, the hoses seem a little on the cheesy side, but we'll deal with that as it comes, okay? Like I said, I'm probably going to upgrade these to some silicone hose later on down the road just because it's more flexible, it's more durable, it doesn't dry rot, it doesn't harden and split. That's the big thing for me whenever it comes to hoses on my carb gauges. I've got silicone hoses on my gauges that I use almost daily at the ride factory, and I've had that set for, damn, I got to do math. I've had that set for 18, 19 years now at this point, and they've served me well. Now, granted, I dropped about $275 on them back in the day, but the thing is, it was a worthwhile investment to me because I could not tell you literally how many thousands of motorcycles those gauges have been hooked up to over the years. There's no way for me to put a number on that. I can tell you right now, it's been a hell of a lot. Now, a couple of things on those gauges that I showed you that I am going to watch out for and something I'm going to keep in mind until I put them through their paces and I get really, really comfortable with them, kind of like my gauges that I've got at work, is we've got to check the zero on the gauges themselves, make sure that zero stays somewhat stable. Small adjustments are typical. That's something you're going to have to do, and basically you can consider that normal maintenance. Yes, tools have a maintenance schedule as well. Also, on the gauges themselves, a couple of things that I noticed that, kind of makes me a little bit leery of them as far as how well they're going to hold up long term. The screws on the back side of that panel that all the gauges were mounted to, I found two of them that were stripped. I may or may not have to address that in the future. I don't know. It's just going to depend on how well they hold up and, how much I use them. Okay, now we're getting down to the meat and taters of why I'm making this video, okay? This was kind of a twofold. I wanted to show you a tool that will make life easier for you as a DIY motorcycle guy, taking care of your stuff or, getting together, helping out with your buddies, whatever the case may be. But one thing that I wanted to give you guys a heads up on is here in probably about a week, you are going to get a chance to see Hen's Teeth again. That's right, the 85 ZL900 Eliminator, Kawasaki. The bike that started ran when parked. That bike's going to be in here in the temple. We're doing kind of a long-term follow-up on that bike, and I've got a couple of little, piddly-dink things that I need to do on it, and also a couple of things that's popped up here very recently that I need to address pretty quickly before it turns into a major problem for me. Hey, it's old bike shit, man. You're talking a bike that's, it's 39, okay? It's like me right now, minus 9. 8, 9. Anyways, okay, until next time, here from the temple, I love y'all. I look forward to seeing you in the live comments. If you can't make the premiere, hey, no harm, no foul, man. Everybody's got a life outside of YouTube. I know I do, okay? But look forward to seeing you guys, and I hope like hell to see each and every single one of your smiling faces here on the YouTubes here very shortly. Let's get together again sometimes and do this real damn soon, okay? Because it's a hell of a lot of fun. And if you guys caught the live stream last week, I enjoyed that. Honestly, I'm probably going to be doing another live stream here in a couple of weeks, and let's. I'll definitely give you guys advanced warning to where you can pencil it into your schedule. I had a lot of fun with that, so let's get together and do that again here in a couple of weeks. Okay, I'm looking forward to that because y'all are a hell of a lot of fun.
Force will be with you always.